There is a Jewish teaching that on Yom Tov, a Jewish holiday, Chetzio or Chatzi Lashem, v'Chatzi Lachem. One should devote half of the day to God and half of the day to enjoyment. Well, beginning now until sundown tomorrow is an exception to this teaching. The Gaon of Vilna, who lived in the 1700s, he made it clear that there is no joy on Yom Kippur. He also taught us that there is another holiday where this rule, Chatzi Lashem v'Chatzi Lachem, doesn't apply. Purim. Purim, as most of you know, is pure joy. God isn't even mentioned when we read the Megillah. While Purim and Yom Kippur appear to be very different holidays, the mystics argue otherwise. Just by listening to the names of these days, you can get a sense that they share something. Purim and Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is often referred to, as it was in the Kol Nidre prayer recited earlier this evening, as Yom Kippurim. You hear it, right? Some suggest that the k before Purim means like, making the name of Yom Kippurim, Yom Kippur, a day like Purim. Now, the Gaon of Vilna goes on to explain that Yom Kippur and Purim, while very different, they're two halves of one holiday. Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik of blessed memory taught us that only in the most superficial ways are Purim and Yom Kippur different. How in the world could Purim, our day of crazy joy, and Yom Kippur, this solemn moment, be connected? Well, think about it. Both involve masks. On Purim, we hide behind masks, yes, to celebrate, but to capture a theme inherent in the Megillah. We hide to keep ourselves safe. It's what Esther did as queen. Even her name, Esther, has at its core the word Hester, which means hidden. On Purim, whether people wear actual masks or not, we are supposed to get confused when it comes to identifying who people are. We're taught in the Talmud that it's our duty to make ourselves so fragrant with wine on Purim that we're unable to tell the difference between the bad guy, Haman, and the hero, Mordechai. Our own drunkenness, which is as inappropriate as this might be in today's world, symbolic of our overwhelming joy, should keep us from truly seeing people for who they really are. At the same time, this inability to see who people really are is a means by which we turn the world upside down on Purim. This turning upside down, along with hiding behind masks and other costumes, has a bigger, deeper reason. One that resembles the tshuva, the reflection and the growth we should be deeply engaged in today on Yom Kippur. Dr. Penina Feller, who's a teacher at the Schechter Institute of Jewish Studies, says that Purim invites us to set aside as time in which we completely reverse our wardrobe, which in turn reverses our identity. It's an invitation to cross and reverse all the other dichotomies and uniforms of our lives as well. On Purim, we're using clothes against themselves to deny their power, to box us in, and simultaneously to redeem us from needing redemption. Purim makes us wonder if there is an authentic self, if there is one at all, or whether it is all just endless masks upon masks. In the joy and the confusion and the silliness of Purim, there is the push to figure out who we really are so that when the holiday is over, we can present our true self to the world. Well, does this sound familiar at all? It should, because on Yom Kippur, in the midst of the solemnity of this holy day, we're supposed to do exactly the same thing. We're tasked with stripping off the masks we've been hiding behind, except for the ones on your faces right now. I'm sorry, those have to stay on. And figure out how to share who we really are with the world, perhaps even with ourselves. Interestingly enough, wearing these masks has taught me a lot about how we do this. These lifesavers, these controversial contraptions, these things that have somehow divided our society, they've taught me that when it comes to knowing someone, really, really knowing someone, sometimes I rely too much on physical appearance and not the deeper energy that radiates from people. Let me give you an example. I was in Starbucks a few weeks ago, prior to our COVID numbers going down the drain. I was meeting someone there for an in-depth discussion about my June trip to Israel. We found a table away from everyone in the back of the coffee house and took down our masks as we drank our coffee and tea. As we chatted, I felt someone looking at me from across the room. Now, I tried to keep my focus on the person I was speaking with, but sometimes that's hard, especially when you feel eyes on you. So I looked up. And there, across the way, was Joyce Strickland, a member of our community, someone many of you know. She was looking at me. She was properly masked, but I knew it was Joyce, even though I had not seen her in person for so long because of COVID. Her haircut, the style of her clothing, even the way she carried herself, it was unquestionably Joyce. Now, the discussion I was having with the person I was sitting with was pretty intense, but once my eyes connected with Joyce's eyes, she waved and I waved back, and this gave her permission to approach. "What are you doing here?" Joyce asked, sounding surprised to see me. "Just sitting and chatting," I responded. Joyce looked confused. Why, I wondered. Was it concern I saw on her face? Maybe worried that I was sitting inside Starbucks during a pandemic? Was she upset that I wasn't giving her my full attention as I tried to remain engaged with my table mate? I wasn't sure. "It's good to see you in person. We'll have to get together soon," I said. She took off her mask for a moment to drink her beverage, and it was Joyce for sure, but she looked different. Remember, I hadn't seen her in months, almost a year. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was something about her that just wasn't Joyce. Kind of made sense. I mean, COVID has changed us all, hasn't it? And when you're used to seeing people with masks on all the time, they start to look odd without a mask. A sad statement about our reality. Joyce smiled. I really felt she wanted to join our conversation, but it just wasn't the right time or place. Plus, in the era of COVID, inviting someone to pull up a chair and join a small table is just not a thing. I'm sure Joyce felt that she didn't really have a place at the table, and I felt badly. We said our goodbyes, and off she went. Later that day, I made a point to check in on Joyce, and I texted her, "Good to see you today." And her response? A question mark. She had no idea what I was talking about. It wasn't Joyce in Starbucks. After we went back and forth for a few minutes, Joyce and I had a good laugh, and by the way, she knows that I'm talking about this tonight. So now it made sense to me why there was something not quite right about the way she looked. I don't know who I was talking to at Starbucks. If it was you, please let me know. I'm sorry that my initial assumption, purely based upon physical appearance, led me to misidentify you. And I assure you all, it was just tea I was drinking at Starbucks. I was not, as we're supposed to do on Purim, making myself fragrant with wine and therefore incapable of telling the real Joyce from the not real Joyce. Now, while Joyce is the only person I have misidentified during the pandemic, the fact is my experience at Starbucks is not the only time that masks have kept me from knowing exactly who I'm talking to these days. And I know that I'm not alone. These masks obscure identities and make it hard to share who we really are with the world. But do they? Now, I have to be honest, I have kind of appreciated my mask, especially on those days I want to go out and run a quick errand and not worry about who I bump into. Sometimes I crave the opportunity to inconspicuously run errands around town dressed in torn sweatpants and a ratty t-shirt and not have to worry about the awkward run-ins that include comments like, "Well, look at you, Rabbi Andrew, you've seen better days." My mask, coupled with my sunglasses and a hat, let me do this. Except during one recent trip to Lowe's. Rob Polito, another member of our community, taught me that I can't always hide behind my mask. Several weeks ago, our toilet broke at home and was leaking on the floor. Now, that's a classy thing to talk about on Kol Nidre, isn't it? But I share it with you because it's relevant to my run-in with Rob. The toilet broke on Shabbat, on a Saturday, and I couldn't get a plumber out, and to be honest, I really didn't need one. Even though I'm a Jewish guy, I knew how to fix the problem. I just needed a part at Lowe's. But it being Shabbat, I really didn't want to go out. At the same time, I needed to get this repair done, but I was so comfortable at home, dressed in torn sweats and a ratty t-shirt. No worries, I thought. I'll put on my hat and my glasses and, of course, my mask, and I'll be in and out of Lowe's in no time. No one will notice me. Easy. I arrived at Lowe's, incognito, grabbed the part for the toilet, and headed for the cashier. And soon after, from behind me, I hear, again, dressed head to toe, masked, "Hey, Rabbi!" It was Rob. I was busted. He actually recognized me. Now, as we talked about last week, blowing the shofar is a dangerous thing to do during COVID. It's a COVID spreader, we're taught. Now, we chose to blow the shofar in the garden this year to keep us all safe. In some parts of the Orthodox world, it was decided that when it came to blowing the shofar, one option is to actually put a mask over the opening of the shofar. This decision was based upon the fact that a mask doesn't really affect the sound of the shofar, but it keeps people safe. The shofar, when blown, as you all know, gives off a physical sound, one that, according to the Orthodox Union, isn't affected by a mask. More importantly, the shofar is a spiritual instrument. The sounds of the shofar are not just heard by our ears, they're heard by our souls. They're created to wake our souls up this time of year, and the spiritual sounds of the shofar transcend this physical world. They resonate deep within our core. Like the shofar, We human beings have our physical components, our bodies, but we also have spiritual energy that defines us. As described in the Torah, this spiritual energy, our soul, was breathed into us by God. In the same way, the shofar comes to life when our breath enters it. One of our jobs during the High Holy Days is to unfetter this spiritual energy, this breath of divine within us. The masks we wear of COVID, they might hide our faces and make it hard for people to recognize us and see us, but they can't block this spiritual energy. Just like a mask can't block the sound of a shofar. This being said, other masks we hide behind. Masks that are internal blocks we impose upon ourselves or others push into our lives, they can keep us from sharing this energy. Depression, addiction, fear, anxiety, insecurities, financial burdens are just some of the life challenges that force us to hide who we really are from this world. We owe it to ourselves and those around us to work hard to strip ourselves of these internal masks. We also owe it to ourselves and those around us to pay attention to the spiritual energy that others share with us. And Rob Polito, he did this. My physical mask, my hat, my sunglasses, they made no difference to him. He knew it was me. That's a credit to his ability not to be tricked by physical appearance and to perceive who I really am. While I was shocked that he knew it was me, as I thought about it, Rob gave me a gift. He let me see that for better or worse, I'm broadcasting my inner shofar to the world around me. Knowing that there are people out there like Rob who perceive that energy that I give off, the energy that is my true self, that's really special. As for my encounter with the lady who I thought was Joyce, I was relying purely on the physical world. I wasn't using my spiritual senses, and this encounter reminded me to look deeper and beyond these masks, to pay attention to the sounds of the inner shofar emanating from within those around me. The prophet Isaiah tells us, lift up your voice like a shofar. Share the sound of your soul with the whole world. Be inspired by the final shofar blast we sound tomorrow evening, marking the end of Yom Kippur, a sound that helps to keep our souls energized as we enter the new year. Interestingly, we make noise on Purim too. We shake the grogger whenever we read Haman's name. Whereas the shofar is a spiritual tool that awakens our soul and strips it of the masks that bury it deep inside of us, the grogger is designed to drown out the evil out there that's in the world, with the hope that by blotting this evil out, the world will be filled only with joy. In a spiritual way, the grogger is a protective mask, keeping danger away from us. During this complicated time we find ourselves in, a time when physical masks are necessary to keep us safe, but spiritual masks need to be removed in order for us to share our soul. May the final sound of the shofar tomorrow night, a great tekiah gedolah, a long, solid blast, reflect the sound of liberated souls, no longer caught behind internal masks, broadcasting their essence to the world. As we hear this beautiful sound, let us recall the teaching that Yom Kippur and Purim are two halves of one day. May our souls soar higher and higher at the urging of the tekiah gedolah, and at the same time, may we hear in our memories the sound of the grogger, and may this sound remind us that our souls need to be protected right now. Now, more than ever. In the sound of the shofar and in the sound of the grogger, we are reminded to remove those masks that do us harm and reminded to tighten those that keep us safe. Gemar Tov, let's sign ourselves in to the book of life.